Thank you.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us. Just gonna wait a few more moments while folks filter into the room. We want to invite you to write into the chat box, maybe where you're joining us from, why you're here, where you heard about this program. So there's still folks joining every second. So if you can just let us know what you're looking forward to talking about, and we'll be starting the conversation shortly. All right, so it has slowed down a bit, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us. My name is Amelia Lochner-Malave. I am a staff member with the New York State Chapter. Happy Social Work Month. We're so glad to have you here. I'm going to go over just a little bit about Zoom, how we're going to engage tonight, why this topic was chosen, and hand it off to our facilitators. So just a little bit about Zoom. I'm sure everyone is well versed by now, but I'm going to mention a few things. We do have live closed captioning turned on. That should be coming up on the bottom of your screen. If it's in the way of a presentation or over someone's face, you can drag and drop that anywhere on the screen that you would like. There's also a caret next to the closed captioning. You can click that and view full transcript on the right-hand side of your screen, or you can also hide it so it disappears as well. During the presentations, we ask that you stay muted, and please do though ask questions, make comments, discuss with each other in the chat box. Will be moderated, and our facilitators will look to address questions if they're immediate that come up. At the end of the presentations, we really want to hear from you. We're really here to have an open conversation, to hear what you have to say about the report, to hear about your experiences. So we'll be asking you to unmute and discuss with us. You can see that this is recording right now, but we know that some things that you want to say you might not want recorded. So we will be able to pause the recording if it's something that you would not like for us to record and you don't want to be on camera. So we asked social workers from across the state what topic they would like to talk about for our Future of Social Work Town Hall for Social Work Month, and overwhelmingly social workers asked to talk about licensing in New York State and the Social Work Board. We've been collecting experiences from social workers around their licensing experience, around the regulations of licensing, around their customer service experience with the Office of Education, and we've had, I think, nearly 140 social workers respond to us through that survey. So we're glad that this has culminated into a town hall to engage with you further tonight, and look forward to discussion. So I'm going to first hand it off to our current president, Michael Cappiello.
Amelia, thank you so much for that introduction. And it's wonderful when you're on a Zoom and you get some detailed instructions, because we're all, even though we've been doing this for a while, it's always helpful to have some additional resources. So I am currently serving as president of the New York State Chapter. It's been a wonderful 2 years, and I served as president-elect for a year before that, and my term will end at the end of June. And it's just been a wonderful time. I joined NYS when I was a graduate student and have been an active volunteer ever since, and have been mentored by so many people. And I'm seeing some faces on the screen already and names of some of our members who have really mentored my professional life as a social worker, which is what we're all here for, is to be a resource to each other. On behalf of the board of directors, and some of them are here this evening, a particular shout out to Laura Eastman Follis, others whose names maybe I haven't seen on the screen yet. We're just really delighted that you're here, and we're working very hard as a board in collaboration with our staff, who we give particular thanks for all the work that's done by the staff at our offices in Albany. They're such a tremendous resource to all of us, and so we're greatly appreciative of that. And usually when I'm talking about it, it was just great to see where people are from. As you know, there are you may know that there are two chapters in the state of New York, but we're really one state. And we have members from New York City, And across the state, I do shout outs all the way from Buffalo and Niagara Falls up to the North Country, out to the tip of Long Island, Westchester, and the 5 boroughs. Our membership is tremendous, and we really are a model chapter for the United States and have been a resource across the country, particularly over the last 2 years. And I usually do mention the work that we've done during this pandemic. And last evening, for those of you, I see a couple of familiar faces that were with us last evening, there was really a sense of it was just great to be together because we've all been going through so much with the pandemic. And it's between the pandemic and racial reconciliation and the Black Lives Matter movement over the last 2 years, we've done so much outreach and work, but I think it's also left all of us a bit tired at times. And so Social Work Month is really a time for us to celebrate our accomplishments collectively, and also to just kind of pause and give some recognition and thanks for the hard work that so many people have been doing. The theme for Social Work Month this year is escaping me at the moment. It's "The time is now," I think it was. The time is now.
The time is right for social work.
The time is right for
It's been a
social
long
work.
work day, Michael.
I ran from the train station back home to get here on time. Each year there's a theme, and the time is right. And I tie it in just with the work that we've done. The time is right. We have served nationally throughout this pandemic, and also the racial reconciliation work that we've done. The time is right. And you're going to hear this evening specifically about the work that we've been doing specifically around licensing. And I'll give you just a little preview and a shout out to our executive director, Samantha Fletcher, who's really worked tirelessly to go through the regulations, really look at how policy is shaped, both from the state education department for our licensing laws, looking at reimbursement and how that ties into insurance law. And it is incredibly complicated. And we have some really wonderful members who have tracked this over many years. The time is also right for us to take a deeper look and to look at where we need to update some of our policies and practices. And you're going to hear this evening some of the hard work that Sam's done just doing the assessment phase, and also the work that we're doing as a chapter to really help the state and our government partnerships to align some of these policies and practices for the future. And one of the biggest calls that we get is around licensing and around how to communicate and how to work towards your licensing. So that was the focus of tonight. As Evelyn Williams was saying last night, our policy director, there is we need to hear from our members and we need to be responsive to you. And I hope that when you hear the presentation this evening, you'll really recognize that we are hearing you. Certainly your licensing and issues around licensing and salaries have been a priority for us, in addition to all the work that we do in social justice. It's a balance, and it's a balance that we certainly have been aware of for a very long time. I also want to do a little shout out because I'm a school social worker by training. I work for the New York City Department of Education. I had worked in Westchester County for the County Medical Center as a psychiatric social worker. So I do have a special shout out to the school social workers. We're meeting in New York City tomorrow at the UFT. The New York State School Social Work Association and the United Federation of Teachers will meet, probably be about 1,000 of us there in recognition of school social workers in particular. And I see some of our dual members on the screen, and we appreciate the people who are supporters of NASW and then also affiliate with other associations like the Clinical Society and the New York State School Social Workers. So a special shout out for them as well. And I guess that concludes my just introduction. I do see one of our past presidents, Deborah Fromfera, who is on the screen. I'm so appreciative to see you here. Callie, I think, is here from Long Island, who is one of our board members. So if I didn't see you and didn't recognize you, I see some of the leaders of our committees like ethics. Pat, I see you. And those are all the people that I'm seeing on my screen at the moment. It's just so wonderful to see friends through the years and all the collaborations that we've done to make this the chapter that it is. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my co-moderator and our president-elect, Vicki Rizzo.
Thanks, Michael. Hello, it's so great to see everybody here, and I'm looking at the participants, and there are people here that I have known for many, many years, and some people that I've known for a brief period of time. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Vicki Rizzo. I am currently a professor at the University at Albany School of Social Welfare. I spent the first 10 years of my career as a healthcare social worker at Sunnyview Hospital in Schenectady, New York. And then I went off to Columbia, and then I chaired the Department of Social Work at Binghamton. And now I'm back home where my family is, back in Albany. And, I spent my year as president-elect meeting weekly with Michael and with Sam. And it's been a wonderful experience. I'm very excited about tonight's town hall because the reason I ran for president was really to raise the visibility of our profession, and to licensing is a very important issue to me for new licensees, students coming out of schools of social work, as well as individuals coming from other states who want to work in the great state of New York and are having difficulty getting their license, but also to look at what are some of the workforce challenges that we have that we need to focus on in order to attract young people to our profession, and also to revise, revamp, regroup, have workforce initiatives that will make our profession be able to speak to the issues that we're dealing with right now. So I'm really glad to be here with all of you. I'm looking forward to becoming the president. And I want to turn it over to Sam, who really has done such incredible work around licensing. And Michael and I will keep track of the chat. There are already some great questions, Sam, in the chat around licensing. I'm sure you've noticed. So we look forward to having a great conversation.
Thank you, Vicki. And before I start, I'm going to ask Dave to introduce himself.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Dave Diglio. I'm a clinical social worker. I just moved to New York State, back to New York State about 6-7 months ago. I've had clinical licenses in the state of Colorado. I was there for a number of years. In Florida, I did a National Health Service Corps repayment thing down there for a couple of years. And then I've had a private practice in Atlanta for the last 15, 16 years that I left to come back home. I'm from Syracuse, so my family's from here. I wanted to get back to my roots. And I suppose one of my issues is what kind of kicked off this topic entirely was the difficulty I was having as a professional social worker of almost 20 years, getting proper licensure, getting connection from the NYS, getting any kind of feedback. Most every other board I've ever dealt with in my career was tedious, of course, but at least thorough and responsive. This was an entirely different experience. So I'm glad we're having a conversation about this. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's concerned. I know we found many, many stories that have a variety of different roadblocks and obstructions to them getting to licensure and practicing to help the people in the community that need us the most. I suppose that's what I feel like most responsible, that this is a situation in the world right now where they need more social workers, and a lot of us can't get to a level of practice to be able to be there for them. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Dave. And then I also want to just shout out Lauren Keeley, who is on a plane. I'm hoping she gets back in time to be able to join us, who's also been instrumental in writing this report. And so I'm going to talk about a report that we wrote and we sent out to the legislators and to the governor's office. And actually today I'm happy to report that we have a meeting with the governor's office, and we've already been meeting with several legislators about this. So we're going to address that first. And then I do know there's some other questions in the chat that aren't directly related to this that we can get to after we talk about the licensing. I came to NASW in September 2019, and I noticed, one of the first things I noticed was the number of calls and emails that we get about licensing and about working with New York State Education Department. We refer to it as NYS, and issues that social workers were having. So it's just something that, we just kept hearing story after story after story from social workers. By far, it's the biggest complaint that we get at the office is trouble with licensing and not being able to get licensed. And so when I came in, we were doing a lot of restructuring of the chapter and, building the chapter up. And there were a lot of areas to address before we could really move in and focus on licensing. And then when Dave, came across our desk like a year ago now, and really brought up some of these other issues, and being a social worker moving into the state and not having the issues that he was having in New York and all the other states he's licensed in, we were at a place where we could finally kind of take this on and be like, okay, what is going on with licensing, and do a deep dive on it. So we put out the survey to gather stories. And so really everything we're looking at comes from the stories that we have had over the last 2.5 years, as well as the stories we got from our survey. And Lauren reached out, hopefully to several of you here, and personally took your story and wrote it up and added it to our report as more data of what's going on. So I want to start by saying the things we're going to present, we understand that it is not hitting all the issues people are having. We took the top concerns first, because you have to start somewhere, right? Like, we have to start getting change somewhere. So we took top concerns first to address those. So the first thing in our report that we address is the customer service from NYS. We've heard that the wait times go beyond the 6 weeks that's promised on the website, that sometimes we have social workers who don't hear back from the office for 6 months. That oftentimes when someone calls or emails NYS, they don't get a response at all. And, if they do, they may not even be answering the question that they asked. We've had people who they thought that their application was complete and it wasn't. So it sat there for, 6 to 8 months, and they never got a response as to why it wasn't being looked at. We've had people who've been told multiple different things. Like, one person will tell them they need to do this and someone else tells them they need to do that. So those types of complaints. So that's the first thing that we addressed, was kind of outlining the nature of all those complaints, and then making the recommendation that NYS be given funding to be able to hire, we called it like a help desk person, that their sole job was to work with social workers, because there's 61,000 licensed social workers in New York State. That's a lot of people trying to get their license at the same time, or re-register their license, or applying for a new license. So we asked for there to be funding that goes to a full-time staff person, and their whole job is to work with the social workers, return calls, let people know where the status and all that. We've even written a job description up and everything. We also asked that all the people be trained, that every person who is dealing with licensing be trained, and that they have access to a supervisor if it's a complex issue. I'll say that New York State is known to have one of the toughest states on licensing for social workers. It's us in California. And after analyzing the licensing, I can say that's true. Our licensing regulations are written in 4 places. It's written in the education law, the insurance law, the Board of Regents regulations, and the commissioner's regulations. So all of those places hold our licensing information. Even while I was going through this, I would meet with Vicki and Michael and be like, have you ever heard of this? And they're like, no. And both of them have been licensed for over 20 years. So I was like, how would anyone know this, or, be able to find this? It's really complicated and tough to find a lot of the regulations. So we made that recommendation, that they be given a staff person, and then the training for everyone. The next thing that we addressed was, so students are covered. BSW and MSW students can practice clinical social work under supervision in their field placement. As soon as they graduate, they cannot practice until they're licensed. So the workaround to that is there is a temporary license, or a limited license, that the students can apply for, and it's good for 1 year. The issue with that is that it costs the people getting their license over $500. Between the registration fee and the test fee, it's over $500. So for them to get a temporary license is an additional $70. So we did a thorough look at states across the country to see if there were other ways to do this, and if people had grace periods to where the graduate could practice within a certain amount of time, just like a student, and have that same coverage as a student before they have to get licensed. And there are several states that do that. And then New York State does that for nurses. So we requested that graduates be given a grace period of 12 months. And we chose 12 months because of the delays in licensing that people are experiencing. Now, if those delays get addressed, it doesn't have to be 12 months, maybe it could be 3 months. But while there's still all these delays, we need to make sure there's enough time for students to be able to get their license. So that was one of the requests that we made. And especially with COVID, in the aftermath of COVID, I mean, we're really at the starting line of what social workers are going to be dealing with for years, with, complicated grief and, long lasting COVID and just all the things that have happened over the last 2 years. I don't think our mental health crisis is going to go down for a while. So we need as many people to practice as possible. So that was our second recommendation. The third recommendation is, I don't know if you all have noticed this, but the title of licensed master social worker and the title of licensed clinical social worker is protected. You can only use those titles if you've earned them and if you're licensed, but the title of social worker isn't protected. So you'll see jobs where it'll say like social worker or something with social worker in the title, and they're asking for someone with like a high school diploma. I don't know. I just found that really bizarre because like I can't call myself a dentist, or I can't call myself like all these other professions. So why can people call themselves a social worker if they don't have a degree? So we are asking for title protection for social worker, so that our BSWs who can't be licensed are protected with their title. MSWs who don't get licensed are protected, as well as PhDs and BSWs, that our title is social worker. So that was one of our requests. Then we came down to clinical social workers, so the LCSW. So there's 3 things we address with this. And again, I want to reiterate, this is really the beginning. We know that there's more problems and more issues, but we have to start somewhere. So for LCSW, we address 3 things. So right now for LCSW, once you get your LMSW, you can start accruing time. So they ask that you have 2,000 hours of direct practice. So that's diagnosis, assessment and treatment. That's the only thing that counts. So 2,000 hours with a minimum of 3-year full-time equivalent. Well, there's a maximum time on that, and it's 6 years. So you have to get that 3-year full-time equivalent within 6 years, or your time starts over. So that disproportionately impacts people who can't work full-time. And social workers, we tend to be caregivers for children, caregivers for disabled family and friends, for older adults. So we have a lot of social workers, especially during COVID, that maybe they weren't able to work or something got in the way, and they're not going to be able to hit that 6-year mark, and they're going to lose their time. So we requested that be extended to 9 years to allow social workers to accrue that 3-year equivalent, full-time equivalent, to get that 2,000 hours. Then we asked, so another thing that has come up quite a bit is that we have sometimes a supervisor that won't sign off on supervision hours, or it's very rare you have a social worker who gets hired, they stay at that job for 3 years full-time, and then they get their LCSW. That is extremely rare. Usually people move around and they've worked a couple of different jobs while they're trying to get their LCSW. So they may not be able to find their supervisor, and or there's just all sorts of issues that come up. So there is a provision in the law to where if the supervisor has died, where the social worker can get a colleague, a peer, like another licensed clinical social worker to sign off on the hours that they work. But sometimes that's not possible either. Like, so there's all these issues, and then they're stuck. There's literally nothing they can do. You know, we have had some cases where they'll file a complaint, an ethics complaint, that the supervisor refused to sign off on the hours. And you know, but again, you're tied up in paperwork instead of getting your license and being able to treat people. So what we requested is that the social work board, the New York State Social Work Board, be able to hear cases like these, that the social worker be able to present that this is the clinical work I've done, here's my documentation, and that the board make the decision if they've met the requirement or not. Because our social work board, they're social workers. We have LMSWs and LCSWs. So they're the ones in the field, they know. So we want them to be able to say, hey, yeah, you know what, you have met it, whatever your reason is, and you can get your license. Then the third thing is reciprocity. We've had a lot of people moving into New York State that have struggled just really unbelievably to get their license. Like one example that we had recently for an LCSW, the social worker was coming from another state. She had her LCSW. Her supervisor that supervised her hours in that other state had 20 years experience as a social worker, but she had only been supervised for 2 years before she had her 20 years of a licensed clinical social worker. And they said she hadn't had enough time of being supervised to properly supervise the person coming in. And that's not in the regulations. So like, that's not anywhere in there. In New York State, there are regulations, but not in that state. So that's, you know, that's an instance where why can't this person get their license? They were supervised by someone who had 20 years experience, and they're saying they're not qualified to provide the supervision. So that's like an example of like, we're asking that the reciprocity issue be easier to get. And then the last area we addressed with this report is the LCSWR. This is unique to New York. The LCSWR is tied to insurance reimbursement. So essentially, like 20 years ago, when licensing was really happening for social workers, there was work for the LCSWs wanted to be reimbursed by more insurance companies. So the agreement that everyone came to is that once someone had earned their LCSW, that they could continue to be supervised, even though they're legally responsible for clients now, they can provide clinical services. But if they chose, they could continue to be supervised for an additional 3 years, full-time equivalent, by an LCSWR, a licensed psychologist or a psychiatrist. And they have to get like 2,400 contact hours. And then they would qualify for this R designation, which is written into the insurance law to where insurance companies in New York have to cover social workers if they have this R designation. Well, this doesn't exist in other states. So there's a couple of things with this. One is that people going for their R have to have I believe it's 400 contact hours a year for their R. Well, again, we have social workers who are practicing at LCSW who may not hit that 400 mark, like in a 1 year period, and they lose all those hours. So we asked for that to be removed because that's not actually written anywhere. It's not written in the insurance law. The insurance law just says 3 years full-time equivalent, then you can get this credential. The other part is, and Dave could speak to this, is we have social workers like Dave coming in with 20 years full-time experience as a clinician, and there's no way for them to be able to get that R designation except to be supervised for 3 additional years. So we ask that there be some reciprocity for our social workers who are coming from other states who have all this experience, and for them to be able to get that R designation. Dave, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, what I found was I actually even submitted paperwork from colleagues and an ABPN certified board psychiatrist to qualify that. But what I was told directly from NYS was because my supervision didn't actually occur in New York State, as an LCSW in New York State, it can't actually qualify for the R. I assume supervision clinical practice in any state's pretty equivalent across the board. It just was administratively burdensome, right? There was another hurdle. It made it more difficult to qualify for this. I think consistently that's what a lot of people are running into, is just, I don't think it's intentional obstruction, but it's become such a pyramid of paperwork and confusion that you just kind of get lost up in it for months, if not years at a time, it seems like, at least in my experience.
And
Yes.
I thought I would just jump in. There have been some questions in the chat related to the interstate compacts, and also perhaps if you could do a little deeper dive into those areas.
Yes, absolutely. So that was, I just went over the report. That is what we have sent to the legislators, to the governor, to talk about, like, these are some fixes. We made the suggestion of exactly how those fixes can happen. But I do want to get to the interstate compact, because this is something that a lot of people don't know, and we've advertised it, but I don't know, maybe it hasn't been well enough, or people have missed it. So we are in the works of an interstate compact, and have been for the last 18 months. So this is being led by ASWB, but NASW and CSWE are also helping with the process. It takes years to develop an interstate compact. Now, with social work, it's a little more complex than with other professional compacts, because the licensing differences across states are pretty drastic. So New York and California have the highest standards, but then you have states with much lower standards. So when you have that big of a gap, it's a little harder to get that standard across, something that all 50 states would be able to agree to. So it's just the nature of an interstate compact. It takes years to develop it, and they have to get 10 initial states to join. Now, New York State has never signed on to a professional compact for any profession. It's never happened. So that's also something to keep in mind. And that's part of what we had in mind too, when we were doing the licensing report, and addressing some of these licensing things that are complex in New York, that maybe we could streamline them, make them a little simpler, so that when the interstate compact is done, we may be better aligned or positioned to sign on. That being said, there is a lot to consider when considering an interstate compact. And these are things that everyone's going to want to look very closely at, because, some of the things that have been brought up by our private practitioners is things like reimbursement. Because reimbursement a lot of times is dependent on where you live. So people in New York City are reimbursed at higher rates than people in Jefferson County up by Canada. So what happens if you're treating someone in another state? What's the reimbursement? Is that going to lower reimbursement for our social workers in New York State? Because I know no social worker wants that. So when the interstate compact is done, we want to make sure that we really look at it and look at all of the different pros and cons of joining that, and how it may impact practice. But we're not there yet. It's not developed yet. They're still developing it. But once it is, then any information we get, we're going to send to you. We'll probably have town halls like this so that we can get your feedback and see what people say. But it is still a few years away in the process, few years away. Do you feel like that, Michael? Do you feel like that addressed it?
Yeah, and I do thank you because that is you've answered the question, and then also the other questions that get raised each time, particularly from our clinical social workers. So those are certainly big issues. And I was just watching for additional
So
comments. Yep.
Hi, it's Vicki. Could I just add something? So in the
Please.
chat, you definitely answered the question about the Interstate Compact, but there have been questions about national licensing. That is not the same as an Interstate Compact. So having a national license for social work is even a taller order. Like even in medicine, law, all other licensed professions, you're licensed by the state that you live in. So the Interstate Compact, I mean, it's a step in the right direction because it's saying that these states agree that their licenses will be recognized across state borders. Everything that Sam has already outlined about how difficult it is to have interstate compacts is true. You know, also this initial interstate compacts, it's led by ASWB, NASW, and CSWE are involved. It's funded by the Department of Defense, and it's a 5-year grant. So this is not a fast process. And New York State has not been a state that's been very embracing of interstate compacts, which is like an important, that doesn't mean we're not going to be fighting for it, but that's just sort of precedent in the state.
If I may, real quick, I've held a license in Colorado, Florida, Georgia, and New York now. This state isn't what all the other experiences I've had is. It's not so complicated. It's not so difficult to interact. There's a social work board of our peers, people who are LCSWs, people who are LMSWs. If we have a problem, we don't go to a single person who makes that decision. They go to a board of our peers that then listen and then make a decision based on the information they have on hand. We don't really have a functional board that's overseeing us all. I think if you've been in this silo, you think this is normal. For most of any other state, this is really difficult to become a clinical social worker, to get qualified from each level, from LMSW to LCSW to LCSWR. It really isn't supposed to be so cumbersome. And we don't really have social workers looking out for social workers here. It feels like you have, I don't know, insurance companies or something else looking out for what we're supposed to be doing, because it feels like it's very financially driven. It's so difficult to get to a point of practice, which is abnormal in every other state, especially the states that are surrounding us. It's a disincentive
That's a
to
really
practice.
good point, David. And I think that what I would like to highlight about your point is the dysfunctional nature of our state board. We have, you know, attended meetings, many of us on the in the chapter and on the board, to try to have an understanding of how the board is functioning. And you're right, they do not hear the cases. And so I think, you know, one of the ways that we really as a chapter can have some influence is to really think carefully about who we want to nominate to be on the New York State board in the Office of the Professions, because this is our profession. So we should have a say in who gets, you know, appointed to that board, so that it is more like other states. They should be overseeing cases.
Vicki, my experience is that it was a single gatekeeper system. The board was an arbitrary part of that system. It
Exactly.
one person to make that decision, not a body of our peers. This one person made arbitrary decisions for the entire body of social workers for the entire state. I've never had such an experience anywhere I've been in 20 years.
Right, and your assessment is, I would say, based on the assessment that I've seen, my assessment concurs with yours about how it functions in the state.
I think it's been really helpful, Dave, and we were so appreciative, you know, because it does take our members sometimes that bring the issues to the forefront. And I think for myself and for many of us, we've only practiced in New York. And like you said, we're so New York centric that sometimes we're not aware of how other states function. And I know Sam's been doing a deeper dive with our colleagues across the country and kind of looking at how, you know, how do other states, you know, in some, we like to think that New York is exceptional in everything, but with humility, we do need to learn from other states that have a better system.
I just want to thank Dominique for what she put in there, that she doesn't feel welcome in New York as a social worker. And we have heard that we have heard that from multiple social workers. We have, some quotes from the survey that we did that, asking us, why does New York hate social workers? And that's a pretty staggering question, and like, this is, as your professional association, our job is to represent you. You're our concern, and you are welcome here. We want you to feel welcome, and we want you to feel like you're needed, and you are needed. I mean, we're hearing from, people all across the state that have 6-month waiting times to get an appointment. Like, we need you practicing. Like, we need you coming in and practicing and working with people. And then I did see a couple of questions about why wouldn't it, meaning the reimbursement, why wouldn't reimbursement be based on where the practitioner is? Well, those are all things that have to be worked out in an interstate compact, because the insurance company is most likely going to say, where is it cheapest? Is it cheaper to cover where the client is or where the practitioner is? So, that's why this is so complex, is because there's so many stakeholders in there that, we may look at something and say, well, this is just common sense. Like, we have the heads of insurance companies who are multi-millionaires. Why is that not trickling down to people who are actually providing services, right? Like, that's what we think. I think that all the time. Like, why aren't we increasing, the rate for social workers and other providers, instead of people at the top of the organization getting grossly rich? But they're at the table too, and they have, powerful lobbyists who are lobbying for the opposite of what we're advocating for. And then, is there a deadline to develop the national licensing standards? Well, it's the Interstate Compact, and it's a 5-year grant. So they put out like their timeline, but it's years, essentially, is the answer, is it's years to do that. Were there other questions that we missed?
I think there was a question earlier on related to some updates in legislation, and we did talk about it last night, but we should repeat it this evening about the telehealth bill that is going through. If you could speak to that better than I could.
Evelyn is our policy director. She's teaching a class tonight, so she couldn't be here. But last night she spoke about this and said, it looks like the parity bill is going through. It looks like it, but right now the budget is due tomorrow at midnight. So everything is on the budget. So, and then I think I did see something about like, when do you go back to the office? Those types of questions in the chat earlier. Like mask mandates, when do you go back to the office? This is information that we've put out on our private practice listserv. And I believe we put in our e-news that the governor has, Amelia's saying, yes, we did. The e-news goes to all of our members. The governor has set the standards on that for, who cannot wear a mask, who has to wear a mask. And usually our answer is, you have to determine what category you fall into. So, like, we can't make that determination for you. Like, you have to determine, are you considered like a health practitioner or not? So we just pass on what the governor has said, and then you make that determination.
And one other thing that I've seen in the chat, Sam, is some questions around the licensing exam.
Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So the licensing exam has been a national issue for a while. There have been significant conversations about bias in the questions and bias against people of color and non-traditional students, and how they have a much more difficult time passing the exam the first time. There have been studies that were done in New York State. There have been studies done in Minnesota. And so there has been great pushback regarding the exam. And it wasn't until recently that ASWB, they formed a task force to really look at the exam and look at the questions that are included on the exam. So, you know, one of our issues is certainly social justice in the exam that individuals are taking. But there is also a movement that's occurring where some states are actually not requiring the licensing exam for the LMSW. Chicago, Illinois is the first state. Like when you graduate, you now do not have to sit for the licensing exam until you are at the point where you're ready to get your clinical license. I mean, another really important thing that's, you know, Sam and Michael and I have talked to the executive director of Illinois. And of course, they just had all the stars aligned for this to get passed in 1 year, which through their state legislature, which is a pretty remarkable thing. But the other thing is just the differences in how much it costs to be licensed. So when you graduate in Illinois, it costs $50 to apply for your license. And here it costs students, you know, by the time you're done with the exam and everything, like $500. So I think that those inequities have to be addressed as well. The other thing that Michael addressed this is like, why isn't everything digital? So the NYS is very behind the times, as any of you who have applied for your first license or relicensing, it's still not very electronic friendly. There aren't fillable forms online. You can't do everything digitally. So one of the things that is in the budget and that they have asked for is they're supposed to be digitally upgrading their systems for all licensed professionals in New York State. But we'll have to see where that goes since the budget is due tomorrow.
Yeah, and I do apologize if we missed your question. I know, feel free to post it again. I see, Sam, you're going to answer the questions about the continuing education credits, how many credits you need for licensing. And there was also a question, which we always like to answer, is how can students get more involved?
Great, very good on both of those. Okay, so Mary Grace says, would you answer the question about the 36 credits needed every 3 years? Can one begin taking the courses soon after receiving the renewed license? Yes, you can take them whenever you want. So just to give everyone a fuller answer here, the first time you're registered as an LMSW or an LCSW, you don't need continuing education credits for the first 3 years. It's a 3-year registration period. You do not need any CEs for your first registration period. Now, once you renew, and that was the key word Mary Grace put in there, is renewed. Once you renew, you need 36 continuing education credits within that 3-year period. You could take all 36 the first month of your renewal period and you're fine. You could take them the last month and you're fine. You can take them anytime. Normally, outside of COVID, you can take 12 of those as a self-study, and the rest have to be what is called live. And we've had questions about this. It doesn't have to be in person. It has to be a live webinar or in person. You have to be able to ask the presenter questions. That's considered live. Now, since COVID and through June, I think July 1st is the cutoff date, you can get all 36 credits through self-study. Honestly, the live webinars, you usually don't have to take a test at the end. You just take a survey and talk about, you know, if you like the course and if you learn from the course. With self-study, you do have to take a quiz on the material. So it's kind of up to you, like what you prefer and what works better. But yeah, and some states have like requirements that you have to have this many ethics or this many diversity. We don't have any of those requirements. It's, you know, whatever you think will train you for your own area of practice you can take. So yeah, any credits, 36 every 3 years. Students, how can students get involved? Well, we send out Act Now campaigns to our members, and then sometimes on our social media for whatever we need advocacy on. We do this from both the federal level and also the state level. So our national office is responsible for federal advocacy. They take the lead in that. and they'll send us a campaign. We call all the campaigns Act Now, and we pass that on to you. And that's where, you click that button and there's already an email written out, but you can put your own message in and it sends to your legislators. So we send that from federal. We also send it from state. And we just sent out 3, like in the last 2 weeks, to everyone. And I actually sent all 3 to all the schools in New York State. And asked for students. I said, this is a great way for students to get involved, have them, do our Act Now campaigns and, send it out to your different schools. Hopefully they pass that on to you so you could do that. We also have, we have Capital Action Day. Evelyn talked about this last night. Next year, it's on February 14th, and we plan to be in person at the Capitol. And we want hundreds of you there. There's 61,000 social workers in New York State. It'd be great to get 200. We had over 50 this year at our virtual Capital Action Day, and the legislators, they were like, okay, social workers are here. Like, we have to listen to social workers. They were coming in the room saying, we want to pay you more money. We want to get rid of your student debt. We're like, great. How can we help you do that? And that's not even why we called them in there. We were calling them in there for our different legislative items. So the more we show up and the more that you're contacting your own legislators, the more they know that social workers are a voting bloc and we're here and you need to listen to us. I feel like sometimes I talk a lot.
No, it was great. And I was thinking, because we had a student last night that was talking of, feeling a little discouraged about voting. And Evelyn, who's our policy director, was really saying, for all of us, the most powerful thing we can do is to vote and to participate in elections. And one of the things that we've been having conversations a lot about is really getting involved in wherever your local community is. Know who's on your school board. Know who's on your town board, know who's on your neighborhood board. Be involved at a local level, because it builds your understanding of the political process. And it does take identifier, as Evelyn was saying, identify you're a social worker, and that you're involved in your community. And all those things really do make a tremendous difference.
Yes, we want them to know who you are. And then I see Tyree hasn't heard back since January from NYS. Yep. And this is what happens. This is a great example that Tyree's giving, and this is what we've heard over and over. Applied in January, is not able to practice because he can't get licensed. So how can I navigate this? So you need to make sure that you have emailed and called NYS, and we know that doesn't mean you're going to get a response if you've done that, but you need to show that you've attempted to try to call and do all of those things, take all of those steps.
There's a question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, go ahead, Michael.
Related to this, I'm just looking at the chat again, is workforce issues.
Yeah.
You'll probably get down to it, which is, and this has come up quite a bit. When can you take your licensing exam? When are you eligible to start working? Because there are major employers of social workers who would love to hire their interns immediately, but they're not licensed.
Right, and that's why we're asking for that grace period. And this, it's until we get some changes and some concrete changes with how this is working. My suggestion to Tyree is make sure you've done your due diligence and that you've reached out and that you've tried to contact them. And if you have not heard back, you can always reach out to your legislator, your New York State senator or your New York State assembly person. You're not going to probably talk to them. You'll end up talking to a staff member. Let them know the issues you're having and see if they can advocate on your behalf to see if you can get your license. But you have to be able to show them that you've done your due diligence, that you've reached out.
And I think kind of related to this, Barbara wrote, and she wants to employ interns, and they weren't getting their licenses till August, even though they took advantage of the New Jersey loophole and took their exam there. And And so now employers are hesitant to hire new grads because they can't hire them right away. And I would say, Barbara, that one of the reasons that we wrote this report is because we did try to lobby at NYS to speed up the licensing for new grads. And we were not as successful as we would have liked to have been, which led to us writing this report and sending it to everyone so that we can, it does need to speed up. And we do need to have a grace period. When I first became a social worker many, many years ago, there was a grace period. You could get hired and then you had to get your license in a certain amount of time. It was 6 months or a year, but it allowed the workforce to continue. And so I'm hearing from my students all the time that they are having difficulty getting jobs because employers are reluctant to hire them before they have their license.
Absolutely. And I have to do a shout out because Barbara was one of my supervisors. And if it wasn't for me, I was an intern in the same program. And if it wasn't for them being, I was hired right after, out of graduate school. So it's, those are wonderful opportunities and they're missed opportunities if we're not able to reconcile some of these issues.
I'm just looking. So, okay. So then I did see another question. Let me go back to this about where you can work as an LMSW to work toward your LCSW. So you have to work somewhere that's approved by NYS. So the place can either be exempt through NYS or approved by NYS. And this is where it gets kind of tricky. Is an LMSW certainly cannot own, well, actually they can own a private practice, but they can't, only as a business owner, not as someone providing services. But we have had LCSWs who own a private practice who've been able to get LMSWs paneled on their insurance as a provider, but they still have to check with New York State to see if it's an approved placement for them to receive their hours from. So this is why I said that this initial report is really just scratching the surface and starting the conversation, because that's a lot of back and forth of, does this place count, or can I work here and get my clinical hours? These are all things that we still have to address, and it's going to take time. And I apologize for that, because I know many of you are, you're waiting now, or you've been waiting. But I want you to know that we are on this, and we're going to continue working with this, and we're going to continue working with the legislators to make this easier for you so that you can start practicing. And then I think, Vicki, you addressed the question about taking the exam and when they could take the exam. You addressed that, right? Oh, you're on mute.
In New York State, you can't take it until you graduate. That wasn't always the case. Someone mentioned that when it was the CSW, you could take it in last semester of study, but there is, the New Jersey loophole, which when I taught in New York City, a lot of students use, they would take the exam in New Jersey, get licensed in New Jersey, and then get licensed in New York. And now we have the temporary, which Deb from Fiera mentioned, you can get a temporary license for $70 to practice until you have your LMSW, but this is just one more fee that students, new graduates, have to pay in order to practice in New York State. And I think that a lot of students feel like they could practice under their supervisor while they're an intern, but as soon as they graduate, they can't. Which, education is different than being a licensed practitioner, but it's just really not good if you graduate and you can't get a job for 6 or 8 months. I mean, there are certain agencies that someone mentioned at the University of Rochester, students can be hired and then they have to get their LMSW in 18 months. And a lot of healthcare facilities do that, but not all agencies do.
And then Dot said, can I continue on how people should try to navigate? So, again, make sure you do your due diligence, send in everything I would document everything I did. I would like send it in an email to myself. These are the documents I sent. Here's the day that I sent it, and, make sure you have all of that documented, and, and then document if you don't get a response, like if you email them or you call them, I would have all of that in documentation that, I've called this day, and this day. I sent an email this day and this day, so that you can show that you've reached out and tried to do that. And then if you've done that and you haven't gotten any response, like Tyree was saying, January till it's April on Friday, that's a really long time. Then I think you can reach out to your assemblyman or your senator. You'll speak to staff and ask them, can you advocate on my behalf? I'm trying to get licensed. We need healthcare providers. I see Deborah from Feria has her hand up. Deborah, why don't you unmute?
Thanks. So just a couple of points. I think schools of social work have a responsibility to make sure their students know that, while it is a $70 fee, but a lot of agencies don't even know that they can have students get provisional licenses. Now that $70 fee is in addition to the fee that you pay to register with New York State, the same fee that I pay every 3 years to re-register my license. That's the fee that gets paid to New York State. And so that's in addition to that registration fee, the additional $70. But that can be true also if someone is pending their LCSW, right? That you can get a provisional license for both, but it's based on the agency signing off on a form designating who's supervising you. But I don't know that all agencies even know they can do that. And so they just say, no, I'm not going to hire this person until you're licensed. So I think there's a part of us. Yes, I think there's changes that are needed to the law, but I think there's also responsibilities that, like schools of social work have that help students and agencies know of these other pathways, that someone shouldn't have to wait to get their license to get a job. There's these other pathways available. And I think sometimes there's just misinformation out there as well that adds to the problem. And then the other point I wanted to ask about, I put it in the chat, but I don't know if it was seen, is that we have this huge deadline coming up as of June 24th, 2022. We are now 18 years into having exemptions if you work for one of the, Department of Health, Department of Education, the Department of Corrections, where we have people doing social work jobs within the scope of practice that is licensed practice that have been able to do this work without a social work degree for many, many years. So if you're regulated by, you're working for, what have you, and that's why places like, hospitals often will hire people and say, we'll give you 18 months because they're under these exemptions. And, it was supposed to expire back in 2006, it got extended, or 1996, it got extended, it got extended, it got extended, it got extended. 2018, there was finally a fix saying that, okay, 1 year after the regulations are written, then these exemptions go away. They were issued in 2020, June 24th, 2020. They were supposed to expire June 24th, 2021. And last minute, the legislature passed another law extending them 1 year because the commissioners keep saying it's going to be too expensive, what have you. So, we also have a way to protect social workers by advocating that only social workers that meet criteria. Yes, we have to change licensing, the rules about licensing laws and work on that, but we also need to protect the scope of practice that we fought so hard for with licensing. And so, I don't know what's going to happen this June 24th. Will it get extended another year? Again, now we're already at 18 years with exemptions. There was 1 year that Cuomo had it in his executive budget to make those exemptions permanent, that we won. We fought that battle and we won. They got that taken out of the budget. But this June 24th is just around the corner. And I just think this is such an important issue for us as a social work association to really think about what is our stance and what are we doing? What is New York City doing? What are we doing as social work organizations if we think exemptions should go away? And I'll mute again.
Deborah, thank you as always. Like you, Deborah works with me a lot. and she, she's always available to answer my questions, and because she's, been doing this for a really long time. So I really appreciate you jumping in, Deborah. I did see a couple of other things. One thing that was brought up in the chat, we addressed last night. One of the things on our list for next year, the legislative session. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the legislative session in New York starts at the beginning of January and usually goes through the first or second week in June. And we're definitely putting this on for next year. And Vicki, actually, I might ask you or Michael to address this. What Evelyn was talking about last night with us going after what the nurses are going after with the student debt relief.
Oh, sure. I just put something in the chat. So this year in the New York State budget, there is a loan forgiveness program called Nurses Across New York State, which is a proposal that if nurses work for 3 years in underserved areas throughout New York State, their loans will be totally forgiven. So Evelyn and the policy team are watching this very closely, because if this passes, it sets great precedent for us. And so we're watching it. And if this is to pass, Evelyn already has it on a calendar that we're going to start working on this like in September, so that we can have, really advocate hard for a similar program in social work. And the precedent's already been set.
So I did see another couple of questions. So I saw Anna goes to the University of Kentucky, but lives in New York, and says that it's much easier to get licensed in Kentucky. So it seems like moving out of New York might be an answer. I think that's something your legislators should hear. Because the whole goal of New York State legislature is to keep New Yorkers in New York and bring new people to New York. So if you all are feeling that way, I think you should definitely reach out to your legislators and explain how upset you are with this process, and that like you're thinking of moving because you don't feel welcome as a social worker in New York, or that you haven't been able to get responses. That's something your legislator works for you. You're in their district, whether you voted for them or not, they work for you. So that's something I would tell them, is that this is a concern of yours. Okay, I'm just kind of scrolling through. Yeah, I think Richard puts a very valid point in there. Richard is saying Richard's part of our private practice, so we work with him quite a bit. He's saying that, that you pay a lot of money to register your license every 3 years. And if you can't get a response to your email, where's the money going? If you can't get a response.
And I was just dropping into the chat our advocacy page, which we went over last night with Evelyn. Do check out our website. It's ongoing. It's being updated in a very ongoing way. And there are easy links to identify who your legislators are. And we've really been saying, I think Evelyn would like to drill down so that you really do, not just your state legislators, but your local, that you have the ability to really identify all the way down to your local government. Is our goal in terms of who represents you, because as Sam is saying, they really are responsive, because people who are in office want to be in office and they want to further the state of New York and their local communities.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very responsive. It can be kind of nerve-wracking to reach out to your legislator, because you're like, oh, what do I say? First of all, you're usually talking to staff, and they're great. Like, they're so friendly and helpful, most of them. And like Evelyn says, you tell them your name and you tell them you're a social worker. Like, that's how you start the conversation. I'm so-and-so and I'm a social worker. And then Peg asked if she's asking about waiting 90 days. Like, if you don't pass the exam, do you have to wait 90 days? I think that regulation is actually, yeah, Deborah's shaking her head, yes. That's from ASWB, not New York State. So that, yeah, we don't, unfortunately, we can't do anything about that one. Yeah, I hear your frustration. I hear your frustration and that, you know, why do we have to work so hard? That's one of the reasons why the board and the members like Dave and Lauren, who've been working with us on this, is that we're trying to take some of that burden off of you and doing the advocacy and setting up these meetings. Because we do know, like, you're working and doing this, like you're working and calling meetings with, you know, people to try to get your licensing. And it is hard. So yeah, Michael, I saw your suggestion. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just saying, you know, we've had some wonderful comments in the chat, and if you would like to speak, ask a question live, just as Deborah did, just raise your hand and we'll call on you and you can pose a question to any of us. And we'll continue to monitor the chat.
Oh, actually, I do want to address something that came up about just a process question of if someone has a complaint against another social worker, like if their peer is maybe doing some unethical practice or something. So there's two ways that you can address that if you have an ethical concern. The first is through NYS, that you can file a complaint at NYS. I don't know, Amelia, are you able to find that link and put it in the chat?
I'll find it.
Thank you. And then the second is NASW. So those are the two avenues. With NASW, they have to be a member. And Deborah, you have to be a member, right? Or no, anyone can file it, but the person has to be a member. So the first thing they'll do is look to see if they're a member. So those are the two avenues for an ethical complaint, or NASW and NYS. I haven't heard of any plans to grandfather in LMSWs. They did have that grandfathering in time period. Vicki and Michael, you might be able to speak more to that.
It's a question that does come up quite often over the years in terms of grandfathering. And I haven't heard anything on that front. And then Deborah, you have your hand up.
So the regulations, if the exemptions expire, is that if somebody is currently working in a job that is doing the scope of practice of someone who's licensed, they can continue in that job, or the way I read the regulations anyway, is they continue in that job or a like position, that they're still able to, they won't lose their position. And that was based on the regulations that were released in 2020 that are still pending implementation because of the law passed last year. So if there's no further legislation, that takes effect. If the exemptions go away, that takes effect as of June 24th, 2022. But so there's protections. The one thing that I was hoping could get changed in that legislation is that they only, if someone has a temporary license, they're not allowed to renew it for a second year. And that would be really, really helpful. So if the exemptions go away, right now, the way it reads is that that temporary license, that provisional license, is good for 12 months. And then at that point, the person would need to be licensed. And that's going to be really for new graduates, someone just starting in a new position, not someone who's been in that position. But there's no opportunity to renew that temporary license. And in early discussions, there was, before that those regulations were written, there was some discussions that perhaps it would be renewable for at least one time, but that was not included in the legislation. That I think would be a helpful fix.
Thank you, as always, Deborah.
Yeah, that was a good reminder. You brought back, Deborah, all the memories of the original licensing and the exemptions and why we had them for so long, because there was a sense, that people that were in positions, as the profession that we are, we weren't looking to like displace people, but they have had 20 years to reconcile this, and we have put the heat. We've kept the heat on it as an issue in terms of all the agencies that do employ various staff that oftentimes are touching on licensed practice. So it does remain certainly in our forefront in terms of an issue. And I think you have captured what the real concerns were, and how they really do need we do need to have this finalized. We have a hand up. Pilar, and welcome back.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I was the one who asked about students being able to do something. So I did go to the advocacy event this year, and I really enjoyed it and I learned a lot. But just even though we get a student membership, we pay less than, somebody else. I think when I mentioned to their students that I'm like a student member, they're like, are you crazy? We're already spending so much money. And I'm like, well, they have a lot of free events as well, but they have a lot of informative ones. And so there's that, so a lot of students, and does that go back to the school who has the duty? But right now it's with COVID and everything, a lot of students are not informed. There's a lot of things that I share with my classmates where they're like, wait, what? No, nobody's told us this. What? Or even going to advocacy day, that was amazing. But again, the same thing, just to pay for that. We already take out so many student loans. I put that on my credit card and paying it little by little. And it's almost like it feels like a huge responsibility, because I'm trying to share everything that I can, but I'm in midterms. I have my internship 3 times a week, the 600 hours plus the lunch hours that don't count, which makes it like almost 700 hours. And I know a lot of my classmates feel discouraged. Most of them are like, why are you bothering? No point in getting licensed, or just, we're just moving out of the state. And again, considering everything, taking everything into consideration. But I do agree that if we move, then nothing's going to change. But I can also see their point of view as fellow students, like, why would they want to deal with this? And so I would love to get other students involved to advocate, and I would love to be part of it, but there's also the whole cost ratio.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be taken into consideration by the NASW as well.
I'm so appreciative because you were here last evening and you have been the voice. And I'm so glad that you came back, because you are the voice. You have come and you've represented students all over and sharing that perspective. And I saw a couple heads nodding. And so I think one of the things after I've started volunteering, I'm a Hunter grad too, by the way. You said you were at Hunter, and I'm an alumnus, so I was pleased that you were here. And also that you will find, and I found this too as a graduate student, that there weren't as many students as I thought actively involved in NASW or faculty. And I really want to give you credit for being here, but I also want to recognize our faculty members who are here and who are very passionate about these issues and who continue to advocate for students in this space, just as you've come to advocate for students and for learning, and how we're gonna be the voice of this profession. So you're making a difference already just in showing up in these spaces, sharing your perspective, because it's incredibly valuable to participate in the conversation. And I see Tyree, you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you. I'm also a Hunter grad. I wanted to speak to kind of what Pilar was mentioning. When I was an undergrad, I didn't think it was of any value because of, like you, there's a cost to paying another fee of being a member. But already being in the field for over a decade, I do regret it because the costs are much higher now. And so this is a question. I think it would be fair to possibly offer some sort of discounted rate to active clinicians who've been working in the city, who've been licensed, who've been giving to the community, to have an opportunity to have some sort of, reduction in membership fees because of possible missed opportunities. I think, and being able to possibly in some way, spread that message to the next generation, right, to take advantage of the opportunity. Because right now, because CEs are so important, unfortunately, where I work, they give them for free, but they're not always things I'm interested in. And so oftentimes I'll pass up on things that the NSAW offers just because it may not be in my budget, right? And so I think being able to offer a discounted rate for, active professionals who are licensed to have the opportunity to rejoin and contribute and take advantage of that. And I think that'd be really helpful.
Debbie, thank you so much for your comment. I was looking, Sam, if you wanted to respond as well, but I will share with you, we have had a tremendous response of social workers from all over the country. And if over the last couple of years, and if you have a chance, check out our website, check out our recordings, check out the Revolution page and the work that we've been doing across the country, which is all open and free. We're doing a lot of outreach and work. And even this evening, it's a set up as a membership meeting, but it's a prospective membership meeting, and it's social workers, who maybe aren't able to pay the membership dues, and we welcome, people's contributions all the time. Yep, I see it's dropped in the chat too, because there are opportunities, and there are conversations. Certainly, if you contacted us or contact the national offices, they do have conversations about different ways that you can participate and access membership. I see another hand went up.
I do. Can I address that?
Oh,
quickly?
and yeah, Sam, you go ahead.
Yeah, Tyree, definitely contact membership services and let them know your situation. And yeah, our philosophy at our chapter is we need to earn your membership. So we do a lot of free events for people and also recognize sometimes people can't afford to renew. They have a life circumstance or something. So we still want you to be able to access a lot of the things we're doing. Not everything. We definitely have member benefits for the members, but a lot. So definitely check out our website, call member services. And I mean, I'll tell you, like, one of the most tangible things that we do for our members is we do offer free CEs every month. In 2021, we had 38.5 free CEs for our members. Our student and transitional members can go to any CE for free. Then we have kept our member rate for CEs for the paid programs at $10 per CE. It's the least expensive I've seen in the country for paid CEs, and we have vowed to keep it there as a member benefit appreciation of our members. But definitely check out our page. I want to go to Midge, but first let me just grab the question that Albert put. Albert was asking about our stance on, I think he's referring to like organizations like Better Health and those nationwide telehealth organizations that have come out recently during COVID. We're aware of them, and we've sent that information to our national office because we have different jurisdictions. Our jurisdiction is New York State, and national deals with federal or anything that's nationwide. But we do have members and board members who keep us apprised of this all the time, and we send it to them every time we get something and make them aware that our members are concerned about this for several reasons. So just so you know, we have passed that on to our national office. And then Midge, you had a question. I can't hear you, Midge. Is that me?
Yeah, I think you started to unmute. It just hit the unmute again. There you go.
That's it?
You're unmuted.
I am unmuted. You can hear me. Okay. It was two things, and I'm sorry. I was having to get used to these little functions. I'm not like you guys, you're so savvy. I'm not, but I'm learning. I'm not gonna give up. So I wanted to really speak quickly in reference to Dominique's frustration. I felt it. And I think someone, I don't know if it was Michael, who said, well, I don't know exactly the words, but you had said something about not having experienced that in New York, that we was too something. And that's true. I didn't know, but I experienced what Dominique experienced, not in New York. 7 years ago, I temporarily closed my practice because I was told that I could go to another state. And also, NYS, someone mentioned that I probably could get, what is it, grandfathered in for the license there. The state was Alabama. And a lot of people there meant well, but they tried to tell me that, oh, wow, with your credentials, you can get something going right away. So I went there and these were responsible people who gave me that information. But thank God I ended up having to come back because I thought I was in another country, maybe a third world country. And so I had never experienced that in New York. And I said, but I thought I really could, because these people say, well, you're coming from New York, you can get this, you won't have a problem. They told me, we don't do that down here. So, I mean, it was so hurtful. I tell you, I made a U-turn, and thank heavens, my friend who owned the office, the whole floor of where she rented to different disciplines, another person like myself, and she was the same, and then there was a couple of attorneys, but she kept my office. And when I got back, she said, I'm so glad. She said, you see your name is still on the door, outside and inside. She says, I'm so glad she came back. She said, but I'm sorry it didn't work out. But it was terrible. And I won't go through the details of how those people did me. So I feel so, I empathize with Dominique, and I feel her pain because I had never experienced anything like that in my life. The minute I said I was from New York, that was it. They wouldn't help me a bit. It was like I was an alien. So I'll leave it at that. The other thing I think Sam had said something about when you register every 3 years, I don't know how many credits you say you have to have for your continuing ed, but the first time they put that out, and we had to start making sure that we have a certain number of credits.
Already?
Okay, let me finish. I don't know. I'm hoping you're not losing it.
No, we can still hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody else unmuted.
Oh, okay. It's just that I don't think when you've been in it for a long time, it seemed like I didn't have to have as many credits as somebody to renew my license. As someone who was in it a lot less years. So is that still true?
Yeah, I think the question has to do with licensing. And just as a recap, and I saw a couple people just put it, somebody had put in the chat too,
Oh, okay.
about their experience with renewals. And, you know, we were expected to, Sam, you'll give me the numbers, but we are expected to keep track of our own continuing education and to attest to that we have done those things. And Sam, do you want to cover the rest of that?
30, I'm so sorry, my dog started barking and I couldn't hear part of it.
It was just a repeat of the question related to how many CEs you need for license renewal.
Sure, absolutely. So in New York State, your first registration period as an LMSW or an LCSW, you don't need any CEs. Now, once you re-register, you need 36 CE credits during the registration period, which is 3 years, and you can get them whenever you want. You can spread it out. You can get them all over a period of 2 months, and it can be on any topic. Oh, I'm glad you brought this up, Midge, because something I do want to say, the organization you get your CEs from has to be registered with NYS.
Yes.
So this has come up before where someone may take a CE course with Colorado, NASW Colorado, that doesn't count in New York State.
Okay,
So you want to make sure that they're registered. In fact, I'm just going to jump on really quickly and get the link and put it in the chat as to where you can go to find the list of approved providers.
okay. I would say though, back here, my license is due next in June. But several years ago, I didn't have to have as many credits as some colleagues who had just been with the Lcsw for about, I think that was the first time they had actually passed the test and was now going into that the year that for the first time they would have to renew. But I hope they didn't raise it, but I can ask questions, I think, when I have to renew my license, right? I think they would give me that answer, but you said you was gonna put it in the chat. Am I saying it right? Oh.
Yes. Yeah, it was in the chat, but you should look at it now before it's time to renew your license, so that you do accumulate. As Sam she mentioned earlier, you can do them, you have time to do them during your license period. Many people do one a month to just keep up on ongoing continuing education. You could wait and cram them all in at the end. That's not recommended. But it's always good. The purpose of this legislation and the continuing education is really for each of us to continue to lifelong learning throughout our professional time and licensing. I do see that we're coming to the end of our time together, and I want to go back and just say a special thank you, Sam, for all the hard work that you have done as our executive director, and particularly share with the rest of the team at the office. Amelia, we're so appreciative and glad that you're back with us. Amelia has been a part of this chapter staff for quite a long time, and has really, 7 years has it been? Yeah, and we're so appreciative of all the hard work and dedication and your commitment to NASW. And please share that with the rest of the staff, certainly Evelyn Williams and the policy team. It has been an incredible journey and pleasure working with Sam and our previous president, and also to be able to work with Vicki and you over the last year as we prepare. Vicki will take on as president of the organization on July 1st. We're very well positioned. It's inspiring to have somebody with the breadth of knowledge that you do, Vicki, and a national stage, and the relationships that you have with the schools of education, and the welcoming for all of our different practice areas. So regardless of your practice area, we represent so many different fields of practice. We're a large membership organization with a very generalist view. And so the purpose of these last two evenings is really to just showcase the hard work that we've been doing in the chapter. And then I also want to extend the invitation. We're going to be doing our statewide awards tomorrow evening. There will be an opportunity if you'd like to join us again, and we're going to be honoring some really outstanding social workers across the state of New York. It's another opportunity. It'll be hosted here on Zoom again. We've been able to reach so many people. The upside of the pandemic is, and it's in the chat. Thank you. It's already there. If you want to register, be a part of tomorrow evening's celebration. It's a great opportunity to be a part of things and to really hear some of the amazing work that's being done by various social workers all over. I see some people putting some goodbyes in the chat. Thank you for being a part of this evening's presentations. And Vicki, did you want to share anything? I'll turn it over to you and Sam for a final closing.
I just want to thank all of you for being here. You've brought up, many really important issues. This was a great conversation, and we hope to continue it. And we hope that you'll be able to join us to celebrate our social workers tomorrow who are getting awards throughout the state.
I just want to again say thank you to everyone. Happy Social Work Month. I'm seeing so many of our friends. If I don't name you, it's just because I didn't see you. But Andrea, it's so good to see you at this stage. We always see you at our other things. And Vanessa's our mascot. She comes to everything. And Stuart, and I saw Naja and Laura and Callie from our board. And we just have so many friends, Orville on our committee, Deborah, who, you know, keeps me in line. Just all these people who come to so many of our events. And if this is your first time, come back. You know, we want to see you. And we do this for you. And I'm so happy that we're closing out Social Work Month, the last 3 nights, with all of you, because you're the reason we do what we do. So, you know, any way we can support you, let us know. I put the info email account in the chat several times. Always reach out to us by info. It'll get to the right person. Whatever you're doing will get to the right person. I'm sorry, my son is saging my room and I'm allergic to smoke, so I'm gonna have a hard time talking here in a minute. So thank you all, and come tomorrow and help us celebrate our Social Work Awards winners. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Happy Social Work Month.
Bye.
All right.